Hey, and welcome to this episode of the Connections, Coffee, and Confidence podcast with me, Janice. I'm willing to bet that if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you've been quietly working at doing your own public relations, which you should. There absolutely are pieces of PR that you are qualified and capable of creating and putting into action. That's what I'm all about. You are the expert on you. But tell me this, how have your results been? Let's talk about 6 reasons your PR work is failing. Hi, I'm Janice Fogarty, and I'm a communications strategist and consultant. The Connections, Coffee, Confidence podcast is for professional women entrepreneurs who have established themselves and their business, and they're ready to get serious about using the power of communication to surpass their business goals. On this podcast, I discuss everything from leadership to establishing a business vision to the intricacies of creating messaging, publicity, and more. I speak to women who excel in communications in their business, whatever they do, and get an inside look at how they created a thriving livelihood. So top up your mug and welcome to this week's episode. 2 quick things that I want to mention before discussing what might be going wrong with your PR efforts. And I'm going to start out with a massive thank you to a Mrs. Baggins who donated through my ACAST supporter page. I really appreciate your support, and I hope you donated as a result of getting really good value from my work here. I am so grateful, and hey, if you would like a shout out too, you can donate through my supporter page, which ACAST has very kindly attached to my show notes for me. And then I'll be here saying thank you to you. Second item is, after listening, you might want some ideas on what to do after you know how to do your PR right. I have a free download called 10 Places to Get Publicity Even with Zero Budget, and I'll link to it in the show notes. But you can also get it by going directly to my website, janicefogarty.com. Now, public relations is simply a strategic communications process where organizations or individuals build relationships with their coworkers, their employees, suppliers, communities, basically anyone who can have an impact on that organization or individual's business. Basically, PR manages an organization's public image and reputation, even their private image and reputation. And you can do this as a solopreneur or an owner of a smaller business without needing to hire an agency. But it can be so frustrating when you work really hard on something and it doesn't give you the results you were hoping for. Go ahead. Ask me how I know. From my professional experience, there tend to be 6 pretty common reasons why you might feel like your PR efforts are failing. So let's start with the big one. No strategy. Without a strategy, like for anything, you don't have much hope of anything succeeding. And PR is the same. You need to have a goal, a reason for your actions and your words. Your strategy is where you map it all out, like if you have a budget and where you'll invest that budget. It'll examine and evaluate where you'll get the best return for your work, your time, and your money. And I say actions because PR isn't only about what you say, but it can also dictate what you do. No matter how meticulously you plan your event or how pretty your post is, no matter if you have fabulous pictures and a beautifully pitched story, the overall success rate and the results for your business are going to be disheartening. You might have a few minor hits, a bit of pickup in the media, or even have a post go viral, but those little snippets don't mean much over the course of a year. You need a cohesive strategy to make sure most, if not all, that you do and say aligns with your goals, that it keeps with your branding and supports your business in a way that you can sustain. That's strategy. The second reason your PR might be failing is your messaging. Messaging is what you say and how. It stems from your goals and is a major part of your overall strategy. If you don't communicate something clearly, concisely, how do you expect it to make an impact? Typically, a message needs to be heard 5 to 7 times before a person remembers it. And that number varies. I have heard crazy things like 21 touch points. 5 to 7 feels intimidating enough. Like really, if you just think about how many times you have to tell your kids to empty the dishwasher, right? You want to make sure that you're repeating the same thing each time that it's heard in order to make that impact. Now, if you use a scattered approach on how you speak about your business or your services, your products, you're going to end up confusing current and maybe worse, prospective clients. When you aren't clear about what you say, about the lasting impression or the results that you want from your words, you ruin your chances of accomplishing your goals because people will tune you out. I refer you back to asking your kids to empty the dishwasher. If you aren't clear, you risk confusing them. And a confused mind does not buy. How do they refer you to a friend if they aren't really clear on what you do or even who you are? And likewise, if you're a broken record, you'll find yourself speaking to no one. Kids, dishwasher. Now, there is a skill needed to be able to deliver that messaging, the essence of your message, without repeating the exact same words. And that skill can be practiced and learned, but the repetition and the clarity are the keys to effective messaging. Now, if you want help defining your messaging, you can go to my website and get my messaging workbook. Knowing what you want to say and how to say it flips this potential pitfall into a solid piece of your PR strategy. The third area where you might make a mistake is your audience. If you have your messaging down pat, it makes no difference if you're speaking to the wrong people. Your audiences will be different depending on the goals that you've defined in your strategy. So you'll probably speak to an audience of upper class, middle-aged homeowners differently than you will to an upper class, older, and retired homeowner. And different again to a first-time homebuyer of any age. The differences in those audiences might seem slight. I mean, they're all homeowners. But those differences can impact on how your messaging lands, how it will be delivered effectively, and therefore it all impacts on your business. You wouldn't send a letter in the mail to someone in their 30s, and you probably wouldn't go on TikTok to speak to someone in their 80s. I mean, unless you've done some really good audience analysis and you have a specific niche, generalities like this are generally true. But that's the key, knowing your audience. And you also need to be aware if you're speaking to your primary or your secondary audience, or that is the immediate person that you want to influence, or the person who will influence your primary target audience. This kind of differentiation will impact on your messaging and delivery, and sometimes it requires a shift in your own thinking. But essentially, if you aren't talking to the right people, you have no hope of those right people doing what it is in your meticulous messaging. They're never going to hear it. The fourth mistake that you might make is not having a hook or an angle, sometimes known as a so what, as in, so what? That's what the journalist, the podcaster, the blogger, the influencer, that's what they're going to ask. Why do I, or my readers, my listeners, my audience care? I personally have people pitch to come on my podcast, and they've clearly done nothing to think about why I might want to share their story. You don't hear from those people. There's an interesting difference between entrepreneur groups. I find people either do not see their story or they don't see it as valuable, and therefore they don't pitch themselves or push their PR efforts too far. Sure, they might post about it or mention it in conversation to clients, but they don't use it as a tool as effectively as they could. They sit on a really interesting or unusual story because they don't understand the potential power behind the PR aspect. Now, admittedly, there are possibly other reasons, such as being shy or feeling successful enough that they don't need to grow further right now, or just not knowing how to use it effectively so it withers as an idea. But usually it's just a different perspective to what someone like me would have on what they have to offer. And then there are those who want to grow, and they are so confident in what they have to offer or who they are that they just assume everyone else will see the value. They'll see the relevancy or the importance. And that can be a big mistake. As an entrepreneur, your job is to sell your business to the best of your ability. And that's the same as a blogger's job or a journalist's job or whoever else you're trying to pitch to or work with. They'll have an audience or a customer or client, a partner or a shareholder, someone who they are responsible to cater for. They are the people that you need to convince of your relevancy. You need to answer, so what, before they have the chance to wonder about it. And that is your hook. So pay attention to what's happening in your industry, in your region, in your business. Are there connections that you can make or parallels that you can draw that makes your story or your work relevant and timely? That's your hook. And it's important. The fifth mistake and reason why your PR might be unsuccessful is because you aren't consistent, either with your efforts or your messaging or activities. Remember a few minutes ago I was saying that your actions and words need to match? That's consistency. If they don't match, if you talk about supporting local as a value but you buy your supplies from somebody half a world away, that's not being consistent. And that is detrimental to your reputation, to your local relationships. If you buy local once and never again with no good reason, that's being inconsistent. If you change your messaging, if you backtrack on your promises with no reasonable explanation, if you do something once and never again, your inconsistencies will speak out, even when you stay quiet. Inconsistencies in your messaging and your actions, but also in your efforts with reporters, with potential allies and partners, this can all harm your PR efforts. Sometimes you have to pitch several times before you get picked up. Sometimes you have to review, refine, and be ready to revisit if something changes in the news cycle. You have to be consistent in showing up and proving you can be helpful. You can be relied on. You are prepared to see things through. It can be hard. It can feel like you're wasting time, doing everything wrong, and you know what? Maybe you aren't doing it 100% textbook, but sometimes maybe you just need a pinch of luck, and fortune favors those who stay consistent. And this leads me into mistake number 6, which is you aren't patient. Maybe you aren't patient enough to stay consistent, or to revise your messaging, or to review your audience analysis or audience assumptions and try whatever it is again. Maybe you aren't patient enough to let your entire strategy play out and build long enough to see the results you wanted. PR is not usually known for overnight success. The best reputation is built over time, over consistency. And you need to be clear on your goals, on who you are and what you do, and be and do that again and again. and be patient while you're doing it. Look, if everything feels good, if it all makes sense, if it flows and people seem to like it, stay patient and keep on keeping on. Even a social media strategy takes about 6 months to start showing results. So how's that for an eye-opener on needing consistency and patience, and not to mention having clear messaging and knowing your audience? But trying 5 posts and giving up? That's not going to work. You need your patience. And there you have it. Quick and dirty, 6 common reasons why your PR efforts may be failing. You have no strategy, no messaging, no audience, no hook, no consistency, or no patience. And to be very honest, it's quite possible that if you are missing your strategy, nothing else is going to work. Your business needs goals and a strategy, but any one of these items in isolation, well, that can be critical to your success too. But now you have a list of things to check when you sit and review your public relations work. So don't forget to check out my download on how to get free publicity now that you've gotten your head straight on what not to do. And you can get that at janisfogarty.com. And until next week, my friends, have a fan-freaking-tastic rest of your day. Thanks so much for listening this week. I invite you to sign up for my email list or join me in the Connections Coffee and Confidence community on Facebook. Those are the people who get first dibs on any classes or products I create, and they benefit from the extras I can't get into in a podcast format. I also lovingly request that if you've enjoyed this podcast, you leave a review on Apple. When I see a new review, I get so excited I almost spill my cappuccino froth. Almost. And if you're a woman entrepreneur who's ready to get serious about using the power of communications to grow your business, send me an email at janice@janisfogarty.com. All my details are in the show notes. Thank you again for listening today, and I'll chat with you again next week.